Yes, you absolutely can live off of dividends. I have many clients with less than $500,000 saved up and invested who are living purely off dividends right now at age 45 to 50. It just may look a little different than you're thinking. When you do this strategy, you can just sit back and collect dividends each and every month or quarter knowing that you're not even touching your principal, so you can definitely just live off this forever. Once you hit this stage, you're retired. You have options. You can do whatever you want. I'm going to show you that even if you have less than $1 million saved up or invested, you can definitely live off of this with passive income. Like I said, I have many clients who have well under $500,000 invested, and they're living purely off of their investments. I'll give you the exact breakdown and some exact funds so that you can consider what might be best for you and your portfolio. My name is Nolan Govea. My students call me Professor G, and I made this channel to make investing simplified. Johnson & Johnson pays a very consistent 2.92% dividend and has been doing so for well over 60 years. One can realistically assume that this is going to continue, and not only is that going to continue, the dividend's actually going to continue to increase because each and every one of those years for the past 60 plus years, they've been increasing their dividends. The problem is that even at $1 million invested, a 2.92% dividend yield will only get you about $29,200 per year. You likely aren't living off of just purely that. Now, a slightly higher dividend, but very consistent and actually safer because it's an ETF, would be that of SCHD. SCHD has consistently had a 3.5 to 4% dividend for the life of the fund. Both of those options are very low risk for your portfolio and solid blue chip or solid ETF investing that can definitely be counted on forever. There's no reason why we can't assume that it's just going to keep going. Plus, you're probably going to see some price appreciation with these types of assets, so not only will your dividend be there and probably growing, but also the actual principal that you have is going to grow each and every year. These ones also pay a qualified dividend, which is very important, and I'll go over the taxes in a little bit because that's very important for you to understand if you are ever going to try to live off of dividends. The problem, obviously, with these two first options is that unless you have $2 to $3 million saved up or invested, you likely aren't going to be living off of something with a dividend at 4% or lower, at least purely or primarily. Next, we have the options of higher dividends from higher dividend paying stocks. We have a higher dividend paying company like Altria with a 6.13% dividend, or UPS with a 7.47% dividend, or Pfizer with a 6.79% dividend yield. And then we also have higher dividends from REITs. A couple solid REITs are O, Realty Income, with a 5.47% dividend yield, and then VICI with a 5.33% dividend yield. REIT dividends are usually taxed as ordinary income, not qualified dividends, which may result in higher tax bills unless held in tax advantage accounts like IRAs or 401ks. I'll go over taxes in a second because, again, that's going to be very important for you to understand this. The next type of strategy that people are absolutely using to live off of dividends is actually one that I'm seeing very, very heavy right now, because you definitely don't need anywhere even close to $1 million to actually live off of these types of dividends. I'm going to go over my favorite strategy here, but first, let me introduce you to my favorite cup of coffee from the awesome sponsor of this video, Trade. Now, I know you have your go-to coffee, and I did too, but I've been using and drinking their coffees for over 9 months now, and I'm never going back. Trade's the #1 coffee destination in the US for both hot and cold coffee drinkers. For cold brew lovers, they've teamed up with 15 roasters to create a special collection made just for cold brew, so every cup comes out smooth and delicious every time. Especially in these hot months, that cold brew just hits different. Just like I would never tell you a one-size-fits-all for investing, they do the exact same thing with coffee. You go to the website and take a quick quiz to pick out flavors you usually like, then they match you with the perfect bag of coffee straight to your door. I'll tell you from experience, I've had 8 different bags so far from Trade and they've never missed. On each bag, you get the actual date the coffee was roasted and a very solid flavor profile so you know it's fresh and perfect for you specifically. As a business professor myself, my favorite thing about Trade is that we're supporting local roasters rather than just giving money to the big corporations. This one here came from Lake Tahoe, and then this one came from Denver. Right now, Trade's offering 50% off your 1-month trial at the link down in my description, drinktrade.com/investing. That's drinktrad.com/investing, and the link's down in my description for 50% off that first month. So like I was saying, if you want to be able to live off dividends, you're going to have to find some higher paying dividend assets. My favorite solution is the covered call ETF. These would be ones like JEPI or JEPQ, QYLD, QQQI, SPY-I, and many others. A covered call ETF works like this. The ETF holds a portfolio of stocks like the S&P 500, NASDAQ 100, or a different specific sector. It then sells call options on those holdings to generate income. The premiums collected are distributed to investors, often as monthly dividends. One thing to keep in mind is what I talked about earlier, and that is you need to understand how that dividend's actually being taxed though. It'll be classified either as a qualified dividend or as an ordinary income dividend. If it's classified as a qualified dividend, you're going to be taxed at long-term's capital gains rate, which is very favorable. This will usually be around 15% for most, which is very low for investment income. If it's classified as an ordinary dividend, it means it'll be taxed at your income level. So if you're a high income earner and already have like a 30% income tax, your dividends will be taxed at 30% or higher if it pushes you to a high income bracket. If you're investing within an IRA or a retirement vehicle, then you don't really have to worry about this. But for most people that want to retire early, they're usually investing in a taxable brokerage because you can touch that before age 59 and a half. And so you do need to keep this in mind. For most of the lower style dividends, things like SCHD or even blue chip individual stocks, most of those are going to be qualified dividends, but definitely check that out. For most REITs and most covered call ETFs and anything really that has a higher dividend, 6%, 8%, for sure if it's in the double digits of dividend percentage, you can likely assume that a portion, if not all of that, is going to be taxed at ordinary income. That's kind of usually the catch there. So you definitely want to look into that when weighing in your options. Another thing to also look for is this thing called ROC, or return of capital. In covered call ETFs like QYLD, JEPI, BTCI, part of the monthly distribution is often classified as return of capital. ROC is not income or profit. It's essentially giving you back a portion of your original investment. It reduces your cost basis, which is the amount you paid for the ETF. So one covered call ETF that's very interesting right now is BTCI. The dividend yield per year is in the high 20s up to 30%. This one has a higher dividend for a couple reasons, but also it's quite volatile and risky because the underlying asset is Bitcoin. But if you look here at the fund description, it says that up to 96% of the distribution is considered ROC. To give you a better visual here, here's a super generic example with oversimplified numbers. You buy 100 shares of BTCI at $60 each. That's a $6,000 cost basis. You get a $3 per share ROC distribution, which is $300 total. Your new cost basis now is $5,700 or $57 per share. When you eventually sell, you'll owe capital gains tax on the extra $300 since you already got it back tax deferred. In short, return of capital from covered call ETFs equals tax deferred cash flow now, bigger capital gains bills later. So ROC in the short term is definitely better than something like an ordinary dividend, because if it's an ordinary dividend, as you get that money, say it's $500 per month, if it's ordinary, that gets added to your income. So it looks like you just made more income, so your income tax will go up, obviously. With ROC, it's not added to income specifically, it's not looked at in the same way. This just looks like you're being returned your capital, so you're not being taxed at that point, but down the road when you sell the asset, you will have capital gains tax. In general, we want to find something that defers the taxes or eliminates them altogether. Some great covered call ones in the category that I've liked recently are SPY-I, QQQI, QYLD, and BTCI. Then the last strategy within this passive income idea to be able to live off of passive income is the idea of these super high yielding funds. And as of right now, they're all the rage. A bunch of YouTubers have definitely made very cool looking videos on these very high yielding style funds. But at the end of the day, they're very risky and you gotta be careful. The most famous right now are yield max funds. Some notable names are MSTY, NVDY, and ULTY. The YieldMax MSTR option income strategy ETF MSTY has a trailing 12-month dividend yield of 161.12%. Its current dividend yield is 132.08% per year. That's just insane. But really, is that not a red flag? NVDY has a trailing 12-month dividend yield of 81.04%. ULTY has a dividend yield of 124.36%. The big issue here that I'm seeing, and I'm not sure why not everybody else is seeing this, is that the NAV, the actual price itself, just absolutely erodes like crazy with these types of funds. Like this year, MSTY is down about 31%, a negative 31%. NVDY is down 35%, and ULTY is down 49%. For example, ULTY losing about 50% of its NAV, you could have put $100,000 in a year ago, and now your $100,000 is worth $50,000. Yes, you receive dividends on that all year, but how long can you keep your money in that if it keeps going down by half? Pretty soon you're not going to have any money in there to receive dividends on. Many of these have very, very high expense ratios, over 1% for sure, and so you got to be careful with that because that's eating into your profit as well. I wouldn't touch the YieldMax funds at all, and I definitely don't, but if you do, you definitely want to stay active on them and start getting out of them as soon as you start seeing that NAV erode way too much. So many just want to go straight to that covered call ETF strategy because it's not as risky as that last one that we just showed, but it's also not super small dividends like the first couple of strategies that I was talking about. Yes, you could get there pretty fast using the covered call strategy, but the problem for me is that there's not a lot of history with these funds. They've been around for 3 years, some of them like 5 years. That's really not enough data. They haven't gone through enough market cycles for me to be able to say it's smart to hold these forever. And when we're doing a dividend investing strategy, we have to understand that the whole point here is that if you're going to live off of the dividends, you're pretty much expecting it to do what it's supposed to do for the next 20, 30, 40 years. So here's what many of my clients are doing, and it's a hybrid strategy that I've worked up. I love the consistency, reliability, and stability of those blue chip stocks and the solid blue chip ETFs that I was talking about from before. It also has a qualified dividend, so that's very important as well. For this portion, you could find 5 to 10 blue chip dividend stocks, hopefully from the Dividend Kings list here, or you can piece together 1 or 2 solid ETFs like SCHD, VYM, or FDVV. Let's say you have $500,000 total to invest. For this, I'd want about 30% in this category. So 30% of $500,000 is $150,000. On that $150,000 invested, if you chose SCHD at 3.5% dividend, you could realistically expect about $5,250 in dividends. Next would then be a category of the higher paying dividend stocks or REITs. For this, I'd want about 15% in this category, so that would be $75,000 there. On that $75,000 invested with a 7% dividend, you could realistically expect about $5,250 in dividends. Next would be the most solid covered call ETFs as possible. Like I said, my favorite right now after much research in the space is SPYI, QQQI, and even BTCI. I feel that SPYI is the least risky and BTCI is the most risky, so I'd set it up in this way. 20% to SPYI, 15% to QQQI, and 10% to BTCI. SPYI, if you put $100,000 on that, $100,000 invested with the 12% dividend, you could realistically expect about $12,000 in dividends per year. In QQQI, on that $75,000 invested with the 14.5% dividend, you could realistically expect about $10,875 in dividends. For BTCI, on that $50,000 invested with the 28% dividend, you could realistically expect about $14,000 in dividends. Last, I'd still want to keep growing that nest egg just a little bit at least so that it can keep growing, and then you'll have even more principal to be able to pull from if you do choose to have more dividends down the road. Also in the next decade, I believe that AI and technology and things of that nature are just going to keep booming. So it'd be very smart for you to make sure and have at least some exposure to it. The problem with a lot of these dividend ETFs or dividend stocks is that they're not in the technology sector, or at least not heavy in the technology sector, and so you're missing out on possible gains there. So to be diligent and smart, I'd have at least 10% of the portfolio in the S&P 500. The total dividends per year on $500,000 with that strategy would be $47,375 or $4,000 per month in passive income. So if you had $1 million saved and invested, it'd be more like $94,750 per year or almost $8,000 per month in passive income. The cool thing too is that this is highly customizable. If you wanted less risk, we could take out the BTCI fund and maybe some of the REITs and add in short-term treasury like SGOV that pays about 5% per year in dividends and keeps your money very stable so you're extra protected. If you're younger and you have much more room to let this nest egg keep growing, before you need the dividends, I wouldn't go so heavy into dividends yet, and I would have a higher portion in the S&P 500 and even the NASDAQ 100 and other technology ETFs to grow on price appreciation in a much more tax-efficient way, because like I said before, taxes really eat up at the profit. To learn more about how I invest personally, check out this video here on what I've learned investing over the last 18 years. This one's been very helpful to a lot of people, and if you've already seen that video, then watch this video here that I just made over the last week to keep you going strong in your investing journey. And remember to keep investing simplified.